Hi, this is Cool Hand Mike. In this video, we're going to be looking at the RAM search. So if you go to Tools and then select RAM search, the RAM search window will appear up on the right. RAM search allows you to search through memory for interesting values and addresses. For example, if you wanted to search for certain states or health or positions of characters or items, you can do so using RAM search. RAM search is very useful if you know exactly how the values change and when they change. For example, a boss fight. You have a boss and they have a max value at the start of the battle most of the time, and as you hit them, their health decreases. So you know when to search for when their health decreases. So I'm going to show you an example of how to find a boss health. Rather than immediately going through all the details of the RAM search windows and all its options, I'm going to show you a concrete example of how it can be used. So this is the start of the battle. And to start with, once the battle starts, you want to select the new button here. This will initialize all the values to the state at this point. So he has full health. So now we're going to hit him. Make sure you have the previous value selected and less than, because that's what we're comparing. We want to compare the current value column here, which is the value at this current frame, to the original value, which was the previous, which we selected with new. As you can see, as I'm going through the frames, the previous value is the same as when I click the new button, but this value is starting to change. And he's about to get hit, and he gets hit. Just saw his health change. Now we click this search button here. His health, when I click this, it is going to remove all the addresses here that don't match this criteria. So all the current addresses in the memory domain that have actually increased or remained the same, in other words, not less than, will be removed from this list. Because as you can see, there's a massive amount of addresses here. This will decrease them significantly. See, now there's 395 addresses. So we're in much better shape to actually find the address for where the boss's health is. So we're going to advance some more and hit him again. There. Okay. Now search, which will decrease the amount of addresses again. Okay. 97, still a pretty decent amount, so we're going to try this again. Okay. Search. And now we have 39 addresses. Now what you can do here is, if you look at this grid, you can see how there's a lot of other columns here, such as difference, changes in previous value. The previous was the last value that was searched. Changes is the amount of changes that address went through for the value. So we hit the boss 3 times. This is just an easy way of cutting it down. Obviously, we did not hit the boss 145 times. Our weapon is not hitting him multiple times, does not look like, at least. He is not gaining health, so it's very unlikely that his health has changed 145 times, or any large amount. So I'm going to click the column and sort this. Now, we hit him 3 times, so this may be the actual address, right here. 000E8F for 29 health. Okay, so I'm going to double click this and put this in a watch for the RAM watch. And then save this here. But let's take a look at this grid again. Maybe there's some other value that's very close that may look appropriate. these don't look appropriate. So I'm going to remove these ones that are very low. If you right click and then select remove selected, and these large values here don't seem to be it either. So these are really the two options here. So usually what you can do is you can poke these addresses. And sometimes when you poke them, you can actually get a different effect. But it may not be graphically obvious immediately. So let's say if we had, I'm going to go with 29. That had 3 changes, not 67. That's probably not even it. So if you go off the changes column, this really is most likely his health. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the start of the fight, load up the branch, and right before I hit him, I'm going to poke in a small amount like 1. And let's see what happens. Let's see how it changes exactly. Oh, he died. That's definitely the health value. However, let's go. We basically really heavily leaned on the changes here. So let's go through a different way of whittling it down. So if you keep an eye on the amount of changes and a reasonable value for what you're looking for, sometimes it can make it very easy to find a value. However, for the sake of searching, let's say that it wasn't so easy to find out this value based on changes, and let's say the value, you're not even sure what it is. Like there's no health bar or anything. So we're going to start this again. We're going to load up the start of the fight. I'm going to remove the changes column and the difference column. You can do that by clicking this columns up here and then changing the options that appear. So we have the start of the fight here. And we're going to try doing this, but this time we're not going to get as many results whittled down. We're going to pretend like we can only get so many. Like maybe we'll do it 2 times. So we have 91 addresses, which is, you know, a pretty decently long list. So what you can do here is you can use something, it's basically like a binary search. What you do is you cut the list in half each time you search. And the way I'm going to cut this down is by selecting half of these addresses, about half. And I'm going to try modifying them by poking the address. This will insert a value into the address like you saw before where it just modifies it. Now if you modify it and it has that result that you are looking for, like it actually seems to change the what happens with the boss, then you know it's in that area. Like here, it had some other weird effects, like where Mega Man actually moved. So his position might be in here as well, in what was selected. But we know that the boss's health is in there as well. So we're going to choose the opposite of what was selected, and we're going to remove those. Remove selected. So now we have 50 addresses. So let's try this again. Oh, let me go back. Okay. So now here, I'm going to try poking half of these addresses and see see what happens with this. Does the boss die? No, the boss does not die. So that means that what was in selected did not have the boss value. So we're going to remove it. Start again, load up the boss. Now we're going to select half again. And we're going to poke 1. Advance. And nope. So we're going to remove again. So as you can see, the list is getting smaller, much smaller from what it was before. We're going to do it again. See, I'm just pretending that this value is just something extremely difficult to find out, and all the values are the same or very similar. Again. No. I'm going to remove these. Now every time it looks like it's cutting down about half. So again. Nope. Now we're down to 2. Now one of these will be it. Let's poke the address on the top one. Nope. So it's the last one. Let's do a little comparison. Or let's poke. Oh, he should die. Yep. So this is the health, for sure. Now using that sort of binary search approach, you can definitely whittle down and find an address where it may not move in ways you know or understand, but as long as you understand what you're poking in, it has an effect, you can basically repeat the change and then whittle down the address list until you've gotten what you've looked for. So now that you've been shown how to get some basic value like a boss's health, let's look at some of these other comparison operators and what you can compare to. So up to this point, we've been using the less than. The boss's health decreases as you damage him, and you search every time he gets damaged. And then by doing that, you can decrease the list of addresses you have to search for until you get a good enough range so that you can pin it down. The other comparison operators you can use are equal to, not equal to, less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, and then different. Different is good if you know that a value changes in specific steps. For instance, let's say that we're using a weapon that damages him 2 damage every time. So every time it gets damaged, let's say you'd put in 2. And then every time you damage him, you could search for the different by 2 from the previous value. And that way you may get a more specific address than if you're just searching for a wide range like less than, for instance. Now when you're using these comparison operators, remember that it's the way you'd think of it is the current value, which would be this column here, the comparison operator, and then the previous value, or whatever you're comparing it to. So current value equal to previous value. And if you say not equal to, the current value not equal to the previous value, and so on. So if we have a specific value here that we want to search for, like if we go to the beginning of the fight, his max health, the flame mammoth, is 32. So if I search for this 32, it should find it. Oh, wait, I've had not equal, so let's start again. Compare 32. So 994 addresses. Now, it's still a pretty wide range. However, now he got hit, and his address is the address's value is no longer 32. So what you can do is then you could switch to not equal to. Okay. So you can see how just in 2 searches, you can pin it down quite in a very small range. And here's that address. So specific value can be very useful. Specifically, I mean, let's start again. Like, let's say you really know that it's just his max health is 32, and every time you hit him, it deals 1 damage. So if you want to use specific value, he gets hit. So in 2 searches, you get the exact address that you needed. Specific value really is the best way of how to pin down an address, but that requires you having the most knowledge of all the values. So you may not be using this as much as you'd like. Specific address can be very useful if you know what address range you're looking for. Like if you know it's within a certain range, what you can do is you can easily get rid of a large amount of values. Like now I know that, like I know that the health is in here. Like let's just say you know it. It's based on, let's say based on how the array is in memory, you know that it's going to be in this range. It may be a bit wider than this, but if you know it, you can cut down the amount of addresses you have to search through dramatically. And specific changes is great, as we saw when the first time we found Flame Mammoth's health. Let's go back to the beginning. So what you can do is we're going to hit him 3 times. So 1, 2, and 3. So there should be 3 changes that occurred. So now we have a list of addresses where there was only 3 changes. And in here, here's the address. But we already know that. So let's say we don't know that at this point. So then what you'd want to do is you may want to use some other criteria to search for. Like let's say different by. You know, you could do different by 1. If you hit him again, you could do that. Let's say you want to hit him, and then you can do another search based on the previous value. And that would probably whittle it down to far less even than this. So mixing and matching these comparison values with what you're searching for can really help you find addresses quickly. So the difference of when you have the equal to on, it will only show the positive difference between the value and the previous. So it's really the current value minus the previous value, and that will give you the difference. So if you use equal to, you can only search for positive values using this here. If you want to also search for negative values, you can use less than. So negative 124 is less than one difference, or less than or equal to, we'll also get this. If you use different by 1, it'll get the different by 1 of this comparison to. So it'll get 2. So if I want a little bit more of a range here, see 4, that would be the difference plus 5. And then if there was a negative 4, I would suspect, I believe that would also be shown. I don't have it here, but that is how that works. Essentially, the different by here would work on the difference, the value in this different column here. So now that we've gone through a lot of the search options, let's look at some of the other ones, like size and display. Now, 1 byte can hold 256 possibilities. If you have it as 2 bytes, it's double that. And then if you select 4 bytes, it's double that. 4 bytes you won't really see in the older systems. You'll see that maybe in like PlayStation. 2 bytes you can see in SNES. 1 byte, you know, you're thinking NES, Atari. So, or values that don't necessarily need that wide range and you can just search for 1 byte. Unsigned is when it means that it won't support negative values or anything. You get the full range, 0 to whatever the max is for that size. If you have signed, what that does is, you can see here there's negative values. It divvies up the range such that like half of it is negative. You can look up more on other sites if you want to see more examples of this, but just understand that unsigned, just 0 to the highest amount, and signed will give you negative. Hex will give you the representation in hexadecimal. A brief explanation of hex is it's a number system that is up to 16. Decimal is 10. Hexadecimal is 16. Again, if you don't understand that, you can look up on, there's a lot of information online and a lot of examples. So if you see, but the short of it is that each of the digits can go from 0 to F. 0 would be value 0, and then F would be 15 in decimal. And then when you go to the next one, 16, you'd carry the 1, and it'd go into the other place over here. So the way you calculated a hexadecimal value into decimal would be to take the place, and then you multiply it by 16. So 1, that'd be 16. A is 10, B is 11, C 12, D 13, E 14. So it's 16 plus 14. So this value would be 30 in decimal. So if I put this back into unsigned, you can see it is 30. The other display option is binary, which you can see here. It's not easy to read, but you have that option. If you go to some of the higher sizes, you also get fixed point options. Basically float, if you're familiar with that, with decimal points. All right, so now let's start talking about some of these other buttons here. If you select the search, it will do the same thing as the search button down here. New will initialize all of these to the current frame values and reset the changes and the difference. If I do some frame advance and then select the, let me get this here, copy value to previous, as you can see in the tooltip, it will copy the current values to the previous one. It does not reset the changes, as you can see, but it does reset the difference to 0 since now the difference of all of these is 0. If you wanted to reset the change counts, you can select that. The eliminate selected items, if you select one and then hold shift and click down, you can select multiple in the grid. And if I selected the remove, it will just remove them. The button next to it will add them to the watch, the ones that you've selected. So let's say if I wanted to add all of these to the RAM watch, which I just popped up, I can click the watch and it adds them all here. The poke button can poke one or multiple addresses with a value. So I just set all those addresses to 0. The freeze will actually freeze the values to what they are currently. So if I were to restart the fight, let's see if I can find a value that's changing. All right, so this one's changing a lot. I'm going to freeze it. You can see how it changed color to that light blue. I'm going to reset the fight. And now if I do some frame advancing, you could see how this value is not changing anymore. Apparently, changing that changed something pretty bad in the game. It did not like that at all. So if you click it again, you can unfreeze it. I'm going to go make sure that the fight advances. So that was probably some sort of maybe counter for the scene itself. Not sure. But that was interesting. So one other thing to be aware of that you can do here is if you do a new, and if you have undo history on, if you go to settings, then use undo history, and you do a frame advance and search, frame advance, search, you will get you will be able to undo the search. So if I were to click this button here, it would go back and then you'd be able to get the previous search's results. And redo will redo what you just undid. And the last button on here that I have not covered is the auto search. It automatically searches each frame. So if I wanted to have that on, it will do this comparison to the previous value and make sure that the new value is greater than the previous value. So what I would be expecting is that I would get the counters. See? It's just getting the counter. Every time the frame increases, the value increases, and it searches for it, and it found it immediately. This can be useful if you also wanted to find possibly the camera or a character's movement or timers like this. Now let's start talking about some of the options up top. If you go to File and Save As, you can save a list of addresses here. File, Save As, and you can save a file here. Then you can open it up. So this is a list I had saved previously. If you wanted to add to this grid from a separate file, you can select a different one. If you wanted to remove addresses using a list, you can select one here. Recent is the recent files that you've opened. Clear would clear these recent files. Freeze would freeze them. Recent settings is the amount of files that it tracks there. So if you increase it, it would go up more. If you go to options and mode, if you have detailed on, which is what I have on by default, you can have the current, you can have the changes here. So as you go by, you can look at the changes to the values. Memory domains, there's the memory domains for the system. The default is usually one you want to use. There are some systems that do have other RAM domains that you may want to look at, but you'd have to know for your system. The size is the same as a drop down here with the 2 bytes. Check misaligned. What that would do is if you have if you had values that you wanted to search that had like 1 to 2 and then 3 and 4, you can do that because usually the 2 bytes increase by 2 as you see here because that's the size. That's why it's called check misaligned. Now big endian and little endian, let me show you real briefly here. So when you view, if you open up hex editor by right clicking over here and opening up the hex editor, you can view the values in RAM. Now the hexadecimal value of 95, if you open up a calculator, like the basic Windows calculator has this, if you go to programmer, click here, programmer, you can input the, and then select hexadecimal, like 95, that's the value here. Go ahead and select enter. That's 95 in hex. If you select decimal, it even shows up here, 149, and that is the same as you see in the grid. So in a way, it's a way of checking. If you were to have this as big endian, it reads it reads the bytes in a different order. It reads them like 0095. Oh, sorry, 9500. And as you can see, the decimal value for that is 38,000. And that's the same here. So it's a different way of reading it. Most systems are little endian, so you don't need this, but Bizhawk will check this off if the system uses big endian. So you don't need to worry about it unless you really know what you're doing and that's what you want. The display type is the same as the options down here. Now define previous value has to do with the previous value column here. Let me refresh this. Okay. So if you have the last search, that was how we were searching before. Every time you search, that frame value becomes the previous value so that then you can keep comparing to it. If you want previous frame, that is similar to the auto search. So for instance, if I have let me close these. If you have the previous frame on, every time the frame changes, the current value goes to the previous value. The original is the original value that you had if you click the new, and the last change is just the last change for that value. By default, you have the last search on. So if you go to the search menu option, the new search there is the same as that button up there. Search is the same as the button. All of these are the same. The only one that seems to be different would be the clear undo history. But right now there is no undo history, so that one is grayed out. Preview mode is good. You'd like that. If you have the red here, it shows that if you searched, it would remove the row. If you don't have it, it would remove those. You don't get to see that. The auto search we saw before. Every time you go through a frame, it does a search. The auto search account for lag is that it won't search if there's a lag frame. That can be nice if you have a game where there's a regular pattern of lag. So it can be very helpful. If you have this option on, always exclude RAM watch list. That means that you already know that you've already found the value. You're looking for something different. So if you have that RAM watch value in there, it won't come up here in this grid. The undo history option, typically it's always on. You do want that on. Save window position. If you open it up, it will just open up in that position. It's always floated from the parent. Stay on top would mean that if you move it, it always just stays on top like that, on top of the other windows. Auto load with Hawk, if you close it down and then reopen it, it'll open up again when you open it. Restore defaults would remove a lot of, if like you've changed some of these options and you didn't know what you changed, you can select the restore defaults to get back to what came with it when you installed it. Here would be the columns. If you didn't want to see the difference or you didn't want to see the changes, this would be where you could remove them. And I believe with that, that covers all the options with the RAM search. If you have any questions, just drop a comment in the below, and thank you for watching.